Just a quick heads up before we start. On Sandwiched, we talk honestly about life, loss, and caregiving. That means conversations may touch on topics such as death and grief. We invite you to listen with care, and please do step away if you need to. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sandwiched, the podcast where we talk all about being sandwiched between life, family, friends, kids, pets, and in some situations, like our guest today, you may actually be a child yourself, just trying to navigate it all. Thank you for joining us. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Eileen O'Doherty. Eileen is a rising graduate at the University of Iowa, and it's an extreme pleasure to have her here today for two reasons. One is she's going to share more about her personal journey, and she's also a member of the Tumbleweed team. Eileen, it's really a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. How's your morning going?
It's going pretty good. I'm excited to be here and talk with you today.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your willingness. Eileen, in conversations, as we're getting started, I wanted to take us back a handful of years to a situation with your mother. You had shared with us that at a very young age, you were told that your mother was going to be dying. Can you walk us through that early story and get us started?
Yes, I remember the day exactly, which is one of the most distinct memories I have. Very early morning, probably like 4 a.m., when my mom was not feeling well and she decided to go to the ER. I had school that day, so I had to get ready for school though. She had all of her tests done and they did find a mass. They didn't know what it was exactly. And pretty much from that day, my life was changed forever. It was never normal or similar to how it was to the day previously, but I persevered and I did as best as I could with the cards that I had been dealt.
And remind me, Eileen, how old were you at this time?
I was 5 years old when she was diagnosed.
Wow, 5 years old, and you can remember it that vividly.
Yes.
How did the rest of the day go? Did you still go to school?
I did not go to school. I was brought home to change out of my uniform and then was brought back to the hospital. I was there for a little while longer as my mom was getting tests, talking to doctors. But as the severity of her illness was brought to light, it was either my grandma or my grandpa came to come and get me from the hospital. And I just spent the rest of the day with them as my mom and my aunt were dealing with all the logistics of dealing with her diagnosis.
Were you informed that day about the diagnosis?
I was informed, but again, I was only 5, so I don't think I really grasped the severity of it at that moment. But I was aware of the fact that things were changing and that she wasn't as well as other people. I understood that.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about your family life. Was it just you and your mom? Was it a whole family that was living together? What was the home life like at that point in time?
Yeah, so my mom was a single mother and I was an only child, so it was just her and I against the world. But that said, we have a great family, a great support system. So although we weren't alone or dealing with anything by ourselves, it was just her and I as our immediate family.
You know, I actually want to call that out because I think that was beautiful. Just you and her against the world. I love that. Thank you. So if memory serves, I think you said initially when we had spoken that she was given, I believe, a year to live. How long after the diagnosis did she end up living before she passed on?
So she passed away when I was 13. So she lasted a lot longer than doctors and people were expecting. And actually, every single time she went in for another round of chemo or radiation or just a checkup, they were like, "We're happy to still see you here, Megan." Like, no one really believed it, but it was awesome that I was able to have the time that I had with her.
And your mom's name is Megan.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you. A lot of our guests who are listening might not be in your situation. They might be in something a little bit different. Maybe they have children that they're caring for while they're caring for an aging parent, perhaps. When you think about what sorts of advice, recommendations, or even it sounds like you had a great circle around you, what best practices as someone navigating this as a young person do you wish that the tools that you would want others to know to help children like yourself to kind of process through grief, dying, and then ultimately death?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that people like to assume that children just want to live their children lives. And yes, that is true, but children are also super observant and very aware. Even if you don't think so, they pick up on things, even if adults are trying to hide it. And I think the best thing for me when my mom was going through her diagnosis was just being upfront and open and honest about everything that was going on. Obviously, doing it in a age appropriate way, in a age appropriate manner, so it's not overwhelming or overly scary. But just being honest with children and saying that things are going to be hard, things are going to be challenging, things are not going to be different, or just even admitting to them that like I'm sorry, but your childhood is not going to be the same as some of your peers, and just really showcasing to them that like you as an adult are there to help them guide whatever feelings or just everything that they're going through. Just being an open person so that they can ask you questions, I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think that to that point, I look at, while I never lost a parent at such a young age, I do agree with you in that children are resilient, but they also are very observant. They may not understand all the intricacies of the things that are happening around them, but they definitely know something's off, something's not right. And I think that it's important, to your point, about being honest with them, helping them navigate the process in an age appropriate way as much as possible. So thank you for sharing that. I'm curious from your perspective, that diagnosis at 5 and then again the passing 8 years later at 13, those are some pretty pivotal moments that I imagine look very different than your peers. Walk me through a little bit about your childhood and then your, youth and your teenage years, navigating through what not a lot of people do, but are pretty complex issues.
Yeah, I think just my mom tried her very best to give me that normal childhood. Again, she was a single mother. She was super sick. She couldn't do all of the things that she wished or hoped she could have done with me, or that she didn't have to, quote, pawn me off on someone else of my family to take care of while she wasn't doing well. But overall, my mom was a super open person, and we had a very close knit community of friends as well beyond our family. So once she was ready to open up about her diagnosis, she told all of our friends. All of our friends told my friends. And while they couldn't understand or necessarily relate, it was helpful for me to not have to hide that part of myself or my identity, because that was a big part of who I was as a kid. It was, like I said, it was just me and my mom. Like, she was my entire world. Like, she was always a forefront of my thought. Um, so I was able to talk with my friends about my mom and her sickness. And again, while they might not have understood, it was helpful to have people my age to talk to, even if what they were providing me wasn't necessarily helpful. But it was good to be able to talk to people outside of my family, because everyone in my family was going through the same thing, just differently.
Yeah. Is there, I saw a little bit of what I might have been interpreted as a memory. Is there a situation with a friend that maybe their advice or the way they responded to your situation that sticks out in your mind?
I think it's just as simple as like, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. I wish I could say more." And it's like, I don't need you to say more. It was just really nice to have you listen to me and just be here for me to talk. Like, I know you're not going to be able to give me advice, and to be quite honest, I don't want you to give me advice. Like, I don't want anyone that I know to have to experience this at the age that I was at. So I would hope you wouldn't be able to relate, really.
Yeah, so true. This episode of Sandwiched is brought to you by Tumbleweed. Tumbleweed is a purpose-driven platform helping families navigate aging, caregiving, and legacy planning with ease and compassion. Right now, the first 100 listeners to sign up will receive a free Tumbleweed membership for 1 full year. That's a value of over $100. But once those 100 spots are gone, they're gone. So don't delay. Go to tumbleweedplan.com. That's tumbleweed plan, PLAN.com. Click Get Started, fill in your account details, and enter the promo code SANDWICHED, SANDWICHED. Thanks for listening. Now back to today's episode. Eileen, so just being you and your mom, I imagine at many different points, you had to start to step up at a young age and take on more responsibilities. Tell me a little bit more about that experience.
Like I mentioned previously, we had a great family community, and while they were super helpful in almost every capacity, at the end of the day, they did go home to their own families and their own homes, and it was just my mom and I at the end of the day. So at times I was cooking, I was cleaning, just having to be by her bedside. We, at the time, in the height of her sickness, we were living in Chicago on the north side, and we lived in a house with the stairs. So after 2 of her surgeries, she wasn't able to walk up the stairs just because of the stitches down her stomach. So we had to move a bed downstairs into the living room so that she could just be more comfortable and not have to maneuver the stairs. And that was a really big change because I no longer had the living room to play in as a kid. So all of my toys had to go upstairs, but that was okay. But yeah, it was just simple things like cooking and cleaning. I wasn't cooking a full course meal, maybe like some pasta, but it was hard being young and having to care, but also I didn't see it as caring at the time because she was my mom and I was like, she's sick, I'm just helping her. Like I'm doing what I would do for me, or I'm doing what she would do for me. That's how I kind of saw it as a kid.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And on my end, very different situation, although I stepped into the caregiver role at a very young age as well. My mother lives with mental illness and she's been institutionalized a lot throughout my life. And I have younger sisters. And so I was often kind of the primary caregiver at different points in time in my upbringing. And it's interesting to your point. I did not see it as caregiving or a responsibility. I think it was like an implied, oh, I'm just the older sibling and these are the things that I do. And it's my mom and these are my sisters and I just help. And so fast forward, right now that I'm in my early 40s and reflecting on some of those experiences, I definitely realized that I've been a caregiver most of my life. Now I know that you're not in your 40s, you're, a young person in college. Do you see yourself looking back in those stages as someone who was a caregiver?
I think now there are moments. I don't know if I would consider myself a sole caregiver just because I was never, my family tried their best to give me that normalized childhood that I didn't really have, especially later on in her sickness when we did move in with my grandparents. They did start taking the brunt of the work and just trying to leave me out of it as best as they can. But obviously at times I did have to step up and step in and do what needed to be done. But I don't really, I would still consider it as just like a responsibility that I had to do just because I knew that she would have done it for me.
That's wonderful. And it seems that, all these years later, my interpretation, right, could be wrong, but I hear it's almost like the gift that you gave to her was trying to be helpful and supportive and enjoy every moment. So that's kind of how it resonated with me.
Yes, for sure.
Wonderful. As your mom was navigating through her diagnosis, I imagine there were a lot of decisions that had to be made about her end of life plans, as well as yours, right? What's next for you? Where would you go? Who would become your guardian? And what lifestyle that she would hope for you as you continued to grow up? Can you tell me about that experience? How did that go? When did it start? And who did you end up moving in with and became a guardian for you after her passing?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, my with my mom's initial diagnosis, she was only given about a year or so to live. So that conversation had to be brought up very early, just in case. Um, and again, luckily we did have the years we had with her, so that plan was able to evolve a little bit and be more solidified. But ultimately, I think my mom's goal was to have me live as normal of a life as possible after dealing with her sickness for as long as I did. And I think the conversation really stemmed from who are going to be the best people to give Eileen that normalized lifestyle. And she ultimately chose my great aunt and uncle. They were a little bit on the older side and didn't have any kids. And that was a really big thing for my mom, as she wanted me to continue being an only child and not have to not only deal with grief and mourning, but also not having to learn how to live in a home with other children or a completely new family dynamic. And so when it came down to it, when my mom was first diagnosed, we were living in the city. And then when she passed away, we were living in Barrington at the time. And all of my family is from Chicago as well. So my aunt and uncle were in the city. But when it came time to my mom passing away, my aunt and uncle uprooted their lives from the city and moved out to the suburbs. That was another big thing my mom wanted for me. I grew up in the city, but she really wanted me to live that suburban lifestyle in a more calm environment after everything. And so not only did they not have a kid of their own, but they were willing to completely change their life at any given notice, because we didn't know when my mom was going to pass away. So it was always up in air when things were going to happen, when things were going to go into effect. But she knew very early on that my aunt and my uncle were the people who were going to keep her same ideations and morals when it came to raising me and giving me that lifestyle that she always wanted for me.
Well, so, I mean, I can't even imagine being in your mom's shoes or your aunt and uncle's, to be honest. Those are some very difficult decisions, very complex. And also, to your point, lots of uprooting. So I don't know your aunt and uncle, but I think it's a great opportunity to say thank you, right? As someone just listening from the outside, what a wonderful gift. It sounds like they were able to give to you. And I'm impressed by your mom's thought process and that she was able to navigate through all of those difficult decisions while also battling a diagnosis that was eventually going to take her away from you. So thank you. I appreciate you sharing all of that. Want to talk about a little bit of the experience following her passing. So you were 13, right?
Yes.
What did the next 6 months, 6 years look like after that moment in time?
I mean, right after her passing was super hard. I was just a teenager. I was in the middle of my 8th grade year. Her passing actually happened right before Christmas, so double whammy. Um, but I think now it just makes the holidays even more special with my family because we celebrate her always. But right after her passing, again, it was the holidays, so super family oriented. Everyone was just super close. And I think right at the beginning, I tried to not think, obviously, I knew it was my new reality. I knew this was now my life. But for as long as I could, I think I tried to push it back, not feel all of the terrible things that I was thinking, or maybe what I could have done. Could I have done something? Just trying not to think about everything that was going on. And I ultimately just kind of turned off my feelings, I guess you could say, in a way, which now that I'm older and I have healed more from this experience, I obviously can say that that's not the thing to do, because it made grieving her worse when I was finally able to. But as years following, I was able to open up more and just be able to be more vulnerable. I shut myself off. I closed myself out from a lot of my friendships, relationships, family, and I just was very alone. And I realize now that I've resolved those relationships and friendships, that I have those back and I nurture those to the best of my ability, is that having a team and having people behind you, even if they're not giving you advice and they're just simply there in a room with you to just feel your feelings, is the best thing possible. And again, being at a young age, I wouldn't have known that. Death is not something you know or can really plan your feelings for, even if you do know that it's coming. You're not going to know how you react or handle things until it happens to you. And it might be different for each death. So you kind of just have to go through the motion of the ocean, as cliche as that might sound, but it does get better. And the ultimately being open after all of these years has helped me tremendously in my grief process with my mom.
Thank you. Motion of the ocean. I love that. I'm very impressed by all that you've navigated, your resiliency, how you've come through and continue to lean into. I mean, sincerely, thank you for your willingness to be so candid and open with us and our guests, and the folks listening, wherever they might be. If there was one piece of advice or one memory you would want people to think about from your story, what would that be?
I think the biggest thing for myself is we were given a time clock, and thankfully that time clock was longer than anticipated, but really utilizing the time that you have. If your loved one is having a good day, really take that good day and use it to the fullest. You never know when things could be the last or when things could go south. And just being able to have little moments to hold on to is what keeps my mom's memory alive. Very soon before she passed, she was feeling good, and we went to Mexico for the first time, her and I together. And that is one of the best, most fond memories I have, because she was super sick. She wasn't doing great, but she was good enough to travel and want to have one last big experience with me. And I hold that week-long trip so close to my heart, and just really utilize all the time that you have.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Where in Mexico did you go?
We were in Puerto Vallarta.
Mhm.
It was amazing. It was so awesome.
That's wonderful. Have you been back since?
I have not been back there, but I have been to Mexico since.
Okay. Something that struck me that I wanted to ask you about is, you were impacted by, you know, healthcare issues and grief at an early stage. Have you experienced any loss since your mom has passed away? Anybody else in your life or in your circle?
Unfortunately, yes. I was fortunate enough to grow up with two of my great grandparents. So they both passed away at the end of my high school, senior year of my high school, and my freshman year of college. So I had time with them. That was amazing, but they have both since passed. And then in this past year, I actually had a cousin of mine pass away due to an accidental overdose, which
Oh
was
gosh.
very unfortunate.
I'm sorry to
But
hear that.
yes, I have plentiful experience with grief.
Yeah. I wish you did not. And I imagine that your approach to those situations probably looked a little bit different. You knew what to anticipate in the grief, maybe a little bit more so than you did with the situation with your mom.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Thank you. Is there anything that you would like to close out with, or anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up and get back to living life?
I just want to say thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me share my story. And I hope that what I said today can just be some guidance for someone or just a helpful thought.
I can only imagine. I took a lot from this, and I know that our listeners will as well. So thank you.
Thank you as well.
All right. Well, that wraps up this session of Sandwiched. Eileen, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time, your candor, and your willingness to talk about navigating diagnosis, caregiving, and ultimately the loss of a parent. We appreciate everything that you brought with us today. And as we always say, a life well planned is a life well lived. And it sounds like you and your mom have always done that. Sandwiched is a Second Act Studio production with support from Tumbleweed. We couldn't do this without the support of our production team, Maddie Willis, Brennan Plank, and our interns, Eileen O'Doherty and Anthony Cano. Thanks for listening, and remember, you are not alone. Have a great one.